I'm going to be now speaking and thinking about that. So it's really looking at what these triggers are. It's really looking at what our habits and behaviors are. It's really looking at what causes something to feel out of alignment, something that doesn't feel quite right in us when we're doing these things. Because as entrepreneurs, as leaders of business, as parents, we are creating something. We are pouring our heart and souls into these things that we are putting into the world. And when those things don't work, or they feel too much, or they feel too big, it causes us to react in a certain kind of way and pulls us back. It makes us question who we are and how we're showing up in the world. But these moments that we get these triggers, that we get these sensations, whether they're physical illness or mental illness, these become the windows, these become the lenses with which we can look at ourselves in different ways, and we can explore what's coming up for us. When we understand how to look through that lens, when we have the wherewithal and the self-awareness and the self-compassion in order to look through that lens. And that's when we turn that window into a door where we can then walk through that and explore that part of us that is feeling that. Because it isn't us, it's a feeling we are experiencing. Too many people tune into their emotions and they say, I am angry, I am sad, I am anxious. No. You are experiencing the sensations of anxiety. You are experiencing the sensations of anger. It's not who you are. The moment you say, I am, you're saying that's a definitive. You're creating a label, you're creating an identity with which you will live up to and create personas and habits and behaviors that perpetuate and compound that belief every time you walk into a room. And as one of my teachers once said to me, labels are Velcroed, not super glued. So you can take that off and you can change it to whatever suits you. Now, it may be that label was a prescription, was an idea, it was someone else's opinion that was pinned on you. They're not your words. It's not your beliefs. What happens to us is, as children, we start to measure our worth based on how we were treated. We have people in our lives show up giving us 40 maps of the world, but these are given to us by people that don't even know how to navigate. And then we wonder why, when we step out of a paid job and become an entrepreneur, or we try something different, or we expand our business or grow our team, that all of a sudden we hit these obstacles and we hit these challenges and we suddenly don't feel like we can, and we don't feel worthy. We feel like it's too much for us. But then we have to understand that these things are the lenses, the windows with which we see the world, or with which we see ourselves in the world. So these things aren't to be shied away from, aren't to be pushed away. These are to be held a little bit closer, to be brought closer with kindness. To be curious, not judgmental of yourself, because the moment you judge someone, you cannot influence them, and that includes yourself. It has to be done with curious, questioning, appreciative inquiry. But these things, these moments that happen when we step outside of our known parameters, we go beyond our comfort zone, and that feeling comes up. In truth, when that does happen, I can hand on heart say for everyone, it's not the first time you felt that way. There will be a moment in your history, whether from school or whether from a parent or a grandparent, where something happened, something was said or wasn't said, that it caused an emotional moment in you. That sensation that's coming up now will be resonant of, it will be an echo of, or a dilution of. And that stressor, that reaction coming up is just an indication of some part of you that needs to be explored. It's just an invitation for you to go and find yourself a little bit more, so you can go and be more of yourself. And I'm not a church person, but I do believe in God. I believe in the universe. I believe in source. And as Dr. Constance was sharing, and so was Julie and Carla, I want to share this quote with you before I kind of break this down a little bit deeper. And it's from the Gospel of Thomas. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. We have these burning passions, these purposes inside of us, and we hold them back, and they corrode us from the inside. They break us down and hold us back because of those beliefs we learn to believe about ourselves based on someone else's opinion. So this is what trauma is, and it's really understanding the truth about trauma and how it shows up in our world. So if you imagine there's a little version of you, and maybe they're 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, maybe whatever age they are, but they're all dressed up as adult clothes, looking like one of those cute wedding card pictures, with the sleeves all hanging down, and there you are in the boardroom of your head, like boss baby. But then something happens. You got mum and dad, and mum is the divine feminine, and dad is the divine masculine, and they're gods, and they have to be, because human babies are the most useless creature on the planet. If you look at a dog, you look at a cat or a buffalo, within 2 hours they can walk, within 2 days they can run. Human baby can't even wipe its own backside for the first 4 years of its life, if you're lucky. And we love them dearly, but it's the truth. But then something happens. Mum says something, dad does something. And you get given this dossier, this folder of how flawed your parents are. And with all the best will in the world, we love our parents, but in the majority, but this happens to all of us. Most parents are unconscious, unaware, asleep, all the way up to willfully abusive and socially negligent. And I work with people in every part of that spectrum. But we get given this dossier in that moment where they don't realize, and our whole world starts collapsing down on itself. And that dossier is trauma. Now, as Gabor Mate says, trauma isn't what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you as a result of what happens to you. But it's something that changes you psychologically and physiologically and causes you to adapt your behavior in order to survive. That's what trauma really is. Trauma can be surviving the 80-car pileup on a Canadian highway, or it could be the last words that your first girlfriend or boyfriend said to you when you were 12 years old. That could be trauma. Something that changes you in that moment. Now, human children and human beings just need 3 things. They need to feel safe, certain, and loved. That's it. Safe with these people, certain they're going to get their needs met, and loved for who they are. But in that moment, when you experience that trauma, you no longer feel safe, you no longer feel certain, you no longer feel loved. It's all gone. But the human brain only wants you to do 2 things: stay alive, make babies. That's it. Super simple. Super simple. This is how the human species has continued to move forward, so well. So what happens in that moment when you don't feel safe and certain, though? The brain, the mind believes you're going to die. Because up until the age of 7, if you don't get your needs met, you can die psychologically and physiologically. If you don't get fed, clothed, kept warm, loved, and held, you can die from not getting those things. So the ego steps in, and this is when your ego first forms. And the ego says, I'll take that away from you. We don't want you to feel like that. We'll take that away. And the little versions of you, like, seriously, bro, I'm good. This is awful. Take it away. So the ego reaches in, it takes the dossier, and it takes the emotions, and it takes some of the memory with it, and it says, right, I'm going to lock it in this room. And I'm going to mark this room a 99 out of 100 for horrendous, right? If you go in here, it's going to be apocalyptic. It's going to be rivers of blood, 4 horsemen, cats liking dogs. It's going to be an absolute mess, right? And the little version of you goes, I'm good, seriously, I won't go. Right, and the ego's like, this is amazing. We're working well on this. And it's all happening in a split second. So the ego locks it away, and the ego says, but in order for you to stay away from this room, you're going to have to change the way you behave. And the little versions of you like, well, I don't want to feel like that. What do you want me to do? And the ego says, and I caveat this, because sometimes this can be the hardest thing for all of us to hear. In order for you to stay away from that room, you're going to have to change the way you behave. And the ego says, you're going to have to say it's all your fault. Whatever it was that happened, whatever it was that was said, it's going to have to be your fault, because if it's not your fault, it's their fault. And if it's their fault, you won't feel safe and certain. Because you don't need love to stay alive. You don't need love to make babies. You must need safety and certainty. But in that moment, what we don't realize is when we say it's all our fault, what we're actually saying is we're not lovable. Because if we were lovable, they wouldn't have done that to us. But we don't realize we're doing it. We're just doing it in that split second. We're 3, 4, 5, 7, 15, 20 years old. And we make that decision in that moment, and the whole game changes. Because we just need connection. Doesn't matter how that connection is or how that connection works. We just need that in order to survive. And then we suddenly change our habits and behaviors, ego working with us, perfectionism, people pleasing, codependency, extreme independency, overworking, addictive behaviors, social media, alcohol, sex, gambling, all of these things, all out there trying to seek validation for who we are, believing that we're not lovable in that moment. But we're seeking it outside of ourselves, thinking that there's a massive chasm inside of who we are. So every time we step out of that known boundary, that known parameter, that known capability, that little part of us gets pushed. This isn't safe. I don't feel safe. I don't feel certain. So then the ego steps in and starts encouraging us to get back into those old habits, those old behaviors. We just end up reacting. This is where that word comes from. We end up reacting a past moment in the present, which stops us from creating the future, because we've lost our ability to respond in that moment. This is what our responsibility is. It's that ability to respond to that thing that's happening. So it's to that curious exploration. But we just end up going round and round. We end up walking backwards in a circle with our eyes closed, wondering why we keep ending up in the same place. We end up in the same relationship with a different person. We end up in a different job, but with the same boss. And then we end up giving ourselves a hard time for not seeing the red flags and turning them into a scarf and wondering why we aren't getting anywhere fast. So in these moments when we catch ourselves going, oh, I should have known better. Why can't I get it right? All of these things, these questions, these painful sensations, these are opportunities to explore who we are. These are opportunities to hold ourselves a little bit closer. These are opportunities to go into our shadowy places, to find our dragons and find the treasure that rests underneath them, as Joseph Campbell referred to. Because in your darkest place are the greatest treasures. They are the most wonderful parts of you with the greatest imaginations. And those parts are worth holding closer. Those parts are worth healing and reconciling. And it might seem that courage is required at the start. But you'll find as you go to those places, those things are transformed. Those past pains become future possibility. They become unleashed potential. New solutions, new ideas, new initiatives, completely inspired from who you are, living on purpose, living defined and definite. This is what comes when we work with our inner child, when we're striving to be the greatest leaders, to be the greatest parents, to be the greatest entrepreneurs. So every part of you is welcome. Every time you think you've made a mistake, every time you think you've caused a problem, every time you feel anxious, every time you bite your nails, every time you drink a bit too much, every time you push too hard, these are all indications of a part of you that is holding a belief, that is protecting that little version of you, because that version, that part of you that is protecting that version of you is doing all of this. It's doing all of this because it loves you. It loves you so much, it would rather see you doing those things and holding yourself back than feeling like you did in that moment when it first showed up in your life. It just doesn't know anything different. Doesn't know you've grown up, doesn't know you've had kids, doesn't know you've got a job, doesn't know you've traveled the world, doesn't know any of those things. It still thinks you're 3 years old. But what holds us together as children is what pulls us apart as adults. Stops us from being who we need to be and living on purpose. This is how it destroys you. This is how it shows up as illness, an incident, autoimmune disorders, mental health challenges, mental limitations, limited beliefs that keep you trapped in a moment. But there is so much richness in that moment when you go back and hold your own hand, when you go back to be the parent you wished you had in that moment, to be the safe place that you needed, to be that part of you that you're still waiting for. Because so many of us are waiting to be rescued, but we don't realize it's actually going to be us rescuing ourselves in that moment and releasing ourselves from the prison. Because you are the key and the cage all at the same time. There is so much wisdom, so much power inside of you that needs to come forth. And this is the beauty when we use hypnotherapy to do this. We can use the hypnotherapeutic state to create a safe space inside your subconscious mind in order for you to go back to be the adult you wished you had, not to re-experience a trauma and re-traumatize an individual, but to go back and be that person, to have a conversation with the 3-year-old version of yourself and be the hand that you're waiting to squeeze, to be the shoulder you need to lean on, and to feel that emotion that wasn't okay in that moment and allow it to release in the safety of your own arms inside your subconscious mind, because your mind does not know what is real or imagined. So in that moment, it feels so real and it feels so good to feel so safe with inside yourself, and then allow that inspiration to flow freely and that creativity to bubble up and enable you to be everything that you came here to be. And this is what I do for people. We change the narrative. We don't take away events. We don't want to take away the building blocks of who you are and why you came to be. We don't want to take away or enable you to forget the valuable lessons and the incredibleness that you are. We just want to change the narrative up here so your relationship to yourself shifts, supports, develops, nourishes. And therefore, as that relationship changes, as you learn to love yourself, you can show the world how to love you. Because that's what makes the world go round. This is where the joy is. Letting yourself go of those past pains, finding yourself in that wound, to go into that wound, to tend it, to nurture it, and to find that actually inside the wound is all of your medicine, and all of your medicine is needed in this now. And my invitation to all of you, I will share in the chat box, website link where you can go there, sign up, and you'll get 4 guided hypnotherapy journeys that support people with anxiety or anxious sensations and how to get those over 4 weeks. I'll also share my Calendly link as well. So if you want to do a free one-to-one, explore what's coming up, I will share that with everyone here. That's open it for the next 3 weeks. And I'll also share my Eventbrite link. I'm watching the moon coming up over here in the UK right now because I love doing this work with leaders, with entrepreneurs, but I also like doing this in a spiritual space and creating these beautiful spiritual dynamic spaces where we can go into hypnosis and literally melt your ego and disappear into the earth and imagine that you're a horse galloping across a field like a grassland with the stallions coming up behind you, and all of these crazy things that we can do with hypnotherapy in order to activate all those most powerful parts of your mind and bring that more online. So I'll share the link to my Eventbrite page as well. And if you wish to join one of the new or full moon journeys, it's all done over Zoom. So I'm looking forward to speaking to everybody here. I hope that's useful and I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much.